SchoolSims, Ken Spero, is one of our business partners, and they have a series of simulation activities that really are a pretty attractive suite of work for professional development. And we chose this particular one obviously because of the school board superintendent relationship, and it gives you some practical thoughts. But at some point, probably toward the end of the activity, Ken will talk about what the other products that they have, because there's a pretty valuable suite of professional development opportunities through training for dealing with a variety of situations. So I won't steal Ken's thunder for that, because he can talk much more eloquently about that than I can. But Ken, thanks for joining us today from just outside Philadelphia, and we're in the socked-in clouds of the White Mountain area of New Hampshire.
Well, it sounds a lot nicer up there than it is. I mean, it's a pretty day, but it sounds like you're probably seeing a much nicer view than we have here.
But we could if the sun was out.
Will it be possible to turn the screen so I can see the room? Is that possible?
We'll try to take off the background so you can see what's going on.
Yeah, just would love to see the class, the room. But otherwise, I can just speak to you, Jerry, and pretend that everybody else is.
No, that's all right. There'll be a few select individuals that won't be within your view, probably, Ken.
Oh, yeah, that's. I mean, that it is what we'll make do.
Note I said select.
There we go. Look at that. There's a room. All right. Well, thank you. So, yeah, and thank you, Jerry. It's a pleasure to be here with you and with the cohorts 4 and 5, I guess, right? Like this to be as interactive as possible. So please, this really is about you, not about us. And the focus will be on some discussion. But I do want to give you a quick sense of what it is we're going to be doing, which may be a little bit different than other things you might have done before. And in particular, the focus is, as Jerry mentioned, simulation. So let me ask you a quick question, and please call out so that I'll be able to hear. Fill in the blank for me. Blank is the best teacher, and I'm not referring to a person. How would you fill in that blank?
Experience is one answer.
Okay. Anybody else? I mean, obviously, I know that it's on the screen, so I kind of gave that one away, but it's pretty much what you generally think of, right? When we think about life or experience being the best teacher, we know that, right? And when it comes to the fact is that from infancy, right, that's how we learn, right? We don't go to classes on how to be a baby. We don't go to classes on how to be a younger person or et cetera. We go through life learning from our experiences, and that's kind of dictates how we progress, right? That gives us the input for our gut reaction, if you will, which is often what we have to draw upon, especially in the role. And the fact is that, and we use simulation as an approximation of experience, right? Because we all know that the school of hard knocks is rather painful. And so the opportunity to have authentic experiences can actually add to that experience portfolio, if you will, that we have in our heads that kind of is filled with our past experiences that we can utilize. We need to populate that as easily as possible, as scalably as possible, if you will. And of course, we know that in many other high stakes industries, like education, simulation is used very broadly, right? You wouldn't put a pilot in a plane without putting them for hours in a simulator. You wouldn't put a physician or nurses into an operating theater or into a patient room without hours in simulation, or the military. So why do we do that with educators or with our administrators? It's not like the stakes are any less high, right? We're dealing with our kids. And it's funny that I've been doing simulations for over almost 35 years now, only more recently in K-12. So I've worked with leaders from around the world in multiple different industries. And I'd suggest to you something that I'm sure you know quite well. The job of the school administrator is one of the most complex, complicated, hardest jobs that I can think of. And I say that because nowhere have I seen a job where the decisions are complicated to start with and the stakes are so high and yet it's exacerbated by a group of stakeholders whose demands are often exclusive of each other, and that each one is more irrational than the next. So no matter what you do as an administrator, as you know, you're going to get whacked. It's not about getting it right, because somebody's not going to agree with you. And the question is, so really the challenge is, from a skill standpoint, is to be able to exercise judgment, good judgment, to make the best decision you can, but at the same time to be resilient enough to be able to roll with the hopefully figurative punches, because they're sure to come, right? That's just the way it is. And this is the kind of where experience is important, is that you cannot teach judgment or resilience. The only way to get better at them is through experience. And of course, as mentioned, the school of hard knocks, frankly, to excuse the language, rather sucks. And so how do we, in fact, provide an opportunity where we can really expose ourselves to opportunities to think? And I find this quote to be particularly compelling. Viktor Frankl was a survivor of the Holocaust. He was a neuroscientist and a psychiatrist. And, he came up with a concept called logotherapy. But one of the things that his quote that I find particularly compelling, especially in today's environment, between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. How often are you faced with situations for the first time, right? We've been going through over the last several years, and especially in schools, right? This is our quote unquote unprecedented, right? It's not like you've had a chance to practice with these kinds of challenging decisions where the stakes, again, are incredibly high, and the differences of opinion are dug in, if you will, right? I imagine that you've had it from both sides, and it's really complicated. And you're going to get faced with high emotion, and you're going to be called upon to make a decision, to make a call. And what are you drawing upon in order to make that decision? And the fact is that by going with you're going to go with your gut. That's the thing that's going to be most present in that moment. What we need to do is train ourselves to actually put in a pause. How do we, in fact, just take a moment and think for a second? That's the muscle memory we need, not the answer, because each time it's going to be different. When you're dealing with a board, right? If you've had to deal with boards, but you've certainly had to deal with parents, you've had to deal with angry staff, you've had to deal with students. The opportunity to think first and then act is obviously something that's most important, because you can't know what's coming. But you do want to be prepared, because deer in the headlights is rarely a good look. And so the opportunity to practice the decision making, but also to do it in a group like we're doing here, because the issues that we simulate are often going to be issues that are contextual, that are dependent on the circumstance, the situation. And they're based on your perspective. What you do is based on how you think. And so you may have one response, but the person sitting next to you may be thinking a little bit differently. And the only way you know their perspective is if they tell you. So this is an opportunity for discussion between each other to see different ways of doing things that are all valid, maybe not something you thought of, but that opens up the opportunity for you to utilize it again in the future. So, just as Jerry mentioned, we have a library of these simulations that we sell a subscription to, right? So we work with districts or with schools, as well as universities, in terms of being able to utilize these. Think of them as automated case studies, although they're much more robust than that. And they can be embedded into, whether it's professional development, whether it's coaching sessions, whether it's team building, et cetera. And we can come back to that at the end. And since they're online, you can use them in a variety of ways. You can use them synchronously, as we're doing now. You can do them and we're doing it both in Zoom and in person. But you can also do them asynchronously. We're going to do that we're going to play the sim as a group, but we could have each of you at your own tables with a computer, and each of you would have your own instance and play in small teams, in breakouts. All these things are options, and it'll become a little bit more clear once we actually open up the sim. So any questions?
No, looks like we're good.
Excellent. And let's shift over to the sim. So this is a simulation called Board Relations, and I think you'll find that there's going to be some, obviously it'll be a, well, you'll see what the scenario is, and there are going to be elements that you can draw upon in your discussion relating to trust. Trust is going to be key, but obviously when you're not dealing with one person only, right, when there's a cadre of different stakeholders, that becomes challenging. And so we're going to see that as it plays out. And this is one that we did a number of years ago with some folks at AASA, and we can proceed. So one real quick note that there is no back button, and we do that on purpose. And the reason for that is there's no mulligans. You make a decision, you're gonna have to deal with it. And it's from think of it as a choose your own adventure type exercise. So we will be we're facing scenarios, we'll have to make decisions, and based on the choice we make, that'll determine the branch that we're going to follow as we progress through this complex case, if you will.
Welcome to the ELS Board Relations Simulation. This simulation is designed to encourage use of critical thinking and communication skills to balance delicate relationships with students, principals, and school board members. In this simulation, we've created a dashboard in the upper right corner of this screen to show how your decisions impact your credibility. You begin with credibility at 50%. Your decisions throughout the simulation will either enhance or diminish from that credibility. Mouse over the dot to see its name. The color may change from time to time based on your choices. Green suggests that you are managing them well, yellow means not so well, and red, well.
So one thing that's important is that there are going to be trade-offs, right? Everything that, whenever we're facing something, when we're challenged with the decision, often it's because of the underlying trade-offs. Credibility might be something you can build, but also it'll detract something else, right? So in terms of being able to see the potential value in the choices that we can make is obviously something that can be quite valuable. And just so you know, these are the characters that we'll be interacting with during the course of the sim. So we are going to take on the role of the superintendent, but we're going to have a principal of the high school and a board member and a high schooler, our SRO, and we can come back, and I'm sorry, I'm clicking through this kind of fast, but just to give you a sense of who we're going to be dealing with, this is the spouse of the principal. This is the head of the board chair, and the other spouse of the board member. And there will be a variety of nonlinear things as well that are going to come up. You see, we might get phone calls, we might get emails or other interruptions. So, stuff happens, right? Even with the best of intentions, we may get distracted by things. And so those things may come up during the course of play.
We hope you will enjoy this simulation and the associated discussion and use the experience to hone skills to assist in your current environment. You're the superintendent of a suburban middle-class school district with 7,000 students. Your district includes one large comprehensive high school, one small alternative high school, and 10 other schools. You have been in the district for 5 years as superintendent. Prior to coming to the district, you had 10 years of experience as a superintendent in another school district, and were a high school principal for 8 years before that.
So in a sim, typically we will tell you a little bit about you in terms of your experience, but that's it, right? Because the goal here is for you to see yourself. So we're not going to tell you anything more about you as the superintendent other than how many years you may have had in the building. So you're coming at this with some, at least, context from that perspective. But we'll learn more about the other characters that we're going to be interacting with, but we will be making decisions as the superintendent.
It's late Friday night following the high school senior prom. You receive an email from the high school principal that the senior prom was a success and went off without any incident. She looks forward to seeing you at graduation on Thursday evening. You relax.
So we get an email from the board chair. You promised board chair Sandy Walters that you would email her Friday night, regardless of the time, with an update on the prom. You let her know that the prom went off without a hitch and that you are looking forward to seeing her at graduation that upcoming Thursday.
Saturday morning, your phone rings. It's Dr. Carol Jackson, the high school principal. Principal Jackson says, "We had an incident after I sent the email last night. I saw 2 students crawling on my front lawn with what appeared to be water balloons at around 1 a.m. When they saw they were being watched, they ran, and one of the boys dropped a balloon that was apparently filled with paint. My husband called the police, and it is my understanding that they have a license plate, but have not determined who the students were at this point. You thank Principal Jackson for the update, and then say..."
So here's where we're going to have to make our first choice. But first, we can check that email that we got. We got that email notification.
Email from Principal Jackson. "Just a quick note to inform you that our twice rescheduled prom this year at Juniper finally concluded without incident. Even though somewhat frustrated, all the students were well behaved and seemed to enjoy themselves. Look forward to seeing you at graduation on Thursday."
Obviously, that got sent before we got the voicemail. So here we are at our first choice. So now we've gotten we have this call. We're on the phone with the principal. What are we going to say? So why don't we take 90 seconds or 2 minutes, turn to the person next to you, or if you're at a small table, I see you're at a small table. So if there's 1 or 2 people around. Now, actually, before you do that, why don't you look at the screen? Can everybody see the screen, or should I read out the choices?
I think they can see it. Can you see it?
Okay. So think A, B, or C, and I want you to commit in your mind which one you would do. Don't have to say anything. Just think in your head what you would do, what your choice option is. Now, when you approach this, you can do one of 2 things. You can think about the answer that you like, that you think you would do, or you can think about, I wouldn't do that, but I'd be curious to see what would happen if I did, because it's safe to do that here. But just have an idea in your mind, and then I'm going to have you speak with the person next to you to talk about it. So take a second to think about what you would do.
And the choices are: please handle the issue on a school level. That's A. B is let's not make a mountain out of a molehill. Let it go. I wouldn't even pursue it. That was B. And choice C, please keep me informed and let me know where the issue goes. Those are the 3 choices. So process that with someone sitting next to you, and then I think there's going to be a vote.
Thank you, Jerry.
You bet.
A is risky because it's not necessarily. Handle this as a school issue. Handle the issue on the school level. Because it's not necessarily a school issue. It's a legal issue.
Right.
The wife, the wife's prerogative. Somebody's going to
Right.
Why don't we take another 30 seconds? Are we ready to take a vote?
Ready? Thumbs up? Ready for a vote? Yeah. We are ready to take a vote, Ken.
Okay. So how many of you wanted to do A?
Choice A, how many hands? There would be 0.
Okay. Well, let's first go through the votes, and then we can ask some questions. How about B?
That 2 would be 0.
Okay. So everybody wants to do C, or are we just not raising our hands?
I heard a resounding C.
A resounding C. Okay. Anybody want to share why?
So it's wouldn't be A because it's not necessarily a school issue. You certainly just necessarily let it go. It's up to the wife who called the police. Like, there's so many reasons why it's not A or B.
So is C, would you have done something different?
Lucy says yes.
Okay, what?
I did say yes. I said that yes to C, but then I also would see myself getting back on the phone with the school board chair.
That's probably coming. So, but you know, the thing in what we do in a sim is really we can sequence things, right? Because you know, you may be thinking more strategically, right? The full solution of what you would do, but we can only do one thing at a time, right? What would you do first? Really is what we're kind of getting at here, right? And we don't want to make it too robust because then it gets too complicated to branch. But it really is how we think, right? And there is, by the way, in the approach, obviously we've circumscribed the issue by giving you 3 choices. But if you would have an alternative, a fourth, even though we wouldn't branch, you'd still have to make one of these 3. But to provoke that kind of discussion around what you maybe there is an obvious choice, but we didn't include it. Why? Well, because it's obvious. And that's, you know, the goal here is really critical thinking. And often in life, right, as you all well know, you may know what you want to do, but you can't do it due to constraints in the circumstance. So often you need to be prepared with an option B or C or D, however many things are constraints you're facing. So anyway, let's not get too caught up in this first choice, but let's get started. Let's keep going. Any further comments before we jump? So remember, each of these, we will be living the consequence of this choice.
Principal Jackson responds, "Thanks. I will let you know when I have more information."
Okay.
It is Monday morning, and as you walk into your office, you notice that you have a voicemail message waiting for you.
Hasn't come in yet.
You immediately return Principal Jackson's call and thank her for the update. She says, "I'm not sure how to tell you this, so I'll just cut to the chase. The license plate came back to Joey Martin, son of Felice Martin, a board member."
Plot thickens. I'm sorry we missed that. The phone message took its
Principal
moment.
Jackson's message: "The police were successful in tracing the license plate from the car. You immediately return Principal Jackson's call and thank her."
So now we see the crux of the problem.
You reply that you know Joey Martin, a 17-year-old senior, and acknowledge that his mother is a member of the Board of Education. How do you respond to Principal Jackson?
Okay, this time we have 4 choices, and I've clicked on this I, which means there's a little bit more information there. So choice A is again, I'm going to ask you to please identify in your own mind what you would do, and then we'll talk about it. So first choice A is don't be influenced by the last name. Carry on with consistent practice. I'll support any direction you go. That's what we'd be saying to the principal. Or B, if you'd like, I'll call the parent and explain the situation. Then I'll allow them to handle it. Or C, you should let it go since there was no damage, no foul. Or D, if I were the high school principal, I would have a quiet conversation with the student. Then I just let it go. What do you think? So first, think in your head what you would do, and then turn to the person next to you and tell them what you would do and why.
What was the incident? Like they had marbles and paper, we didn't hear them.
Well, one of them broke. Yeah.
One of them broke. Oh, but they were. But they didn't like put paint on the car or anything? Didn't say that. And then let it go. So again. Yes, it happened there. So that's why I think it's all.
Yeah, but it's their vote. Does it even deserve, like, yeah, then they should really deserve some of that.
If it was anybody else, would you be calling? If nothing happened?
Right, well, no, think about it this way.
It's a school issue.
Exactly.
Like, why should we?
But that's what that was I mean, the only other option was to let it go. First. Right, so whatever. because it was a student, it was
Yeah, yeah, that's
the
true.
assumption is that the kids would ultimately live out the problem. But again, it's not a school issue necessarily, it's a civil issue.
Right. So I don't know, maybe.
Let's take another 30 seconds.
Might call the police, so it's with the perpetrator being the student, son of the board chair.
The more you get involved.
This is carry on with,
Consistent practice.
Consistent
Carry on with
practice.
consistent practice.
I'll support any direction you go.
It's good conversation happening, Ken.
I would wanna know what they were
Okay,
doing.
let me know when you're ready.
Sometimes you just,
The third option is a good one too.
what was that one?
You should just let it go, since there was no damage, there was no foul.
Well, there's no school-wide consequence.
Right, it's not a school issue.
It's not a school issue.
All right, we have some opinions, Ken.
Okay, so let's take a vote and then we'll talk about those opinions. So, who wants choice A?
Is it your school board or is it?
There's a
It's
question.
your own school board?
Yeah.
Okay, never mind. Got it resolved.
Okay,
Question A, I'm not seeing a flurry of hands.
okay. How about choice B?
Choice B, much pondering, no hands.
Okay, choice C.
Oh, we've got some flapping. Oh, we have some indecision, but couple
What was that, what is C again?
C, you should just let it go. No damage, no foul. No harm, no foul.
I think that it's dependent.
No?
B, was if I were the high school principal, I'd have quiet conversation with the student.
You can't really make
We
a
have-
decision unless you know what the conversation was like from the first one. Like, I think it's really person specific and incident specific, so like, if this is like a volatile school board member who would fly off the handle knowing that you knew something that they didn't know, that's a different phone call than if it's somebody who, like, I think it's very hard to, I think it's,
Now that's a great point. Okay, and so I call you by name, but I don't know who you are. But it's a wonderful point, and part of our goal here, right? That is it exactly a way you would want to approach this, right? This is a contextual issue, and you would have history. Where, you know, that's one of the things where it frustrates me about a case in a case study, right? It's so static, right? There's no context. So we tried to embed some context here, but we don't want to do too much because then we'll lead the witness, so to speak, right? We'll kind of guide you. If we tell you this is a really, really obnoxious board member, and that'll dictate what you're going to do, and may overly influence you. So, but they may be an obnoxious one. You know that, but that's important to come up in the conversation, right? It's wonderful that you brought that up because that would be a consideration, and go ahead and make some assumptions, which may get negated, if you will, or modified based on as you learn more. But that's the nature of the that's the nature of the thought process that you'd want to have when making a decision about something like this, right? Because these things cannot be, nothing happens in a vacuum, nor is that, it would be different if it was an obnoxious versus a well thought, a very thoughtful board member versus somebody who you have a great relationship with, right? That would change how you act, but it would still be a consistent approach, the underlying approach that you would utilize to make that determination. So you can go ahead and make an assumption, articulate it, express that assumption, and we'll see if it gets validated. But it's important to note that you have to build that comfort level with making a decision so you can own it, right? Because ultimately you're going to need to own it. And I actually am curious to know your thoughts. I obviously didn't hear the session that you had on trust, but what are you beginning to see as trade-offs here with respect to building trust or maintaining trust, right? It takes time. It takes an awful lot of time to build trust, and it takes almost no time at all to lose it, right? So, and whose trust are we working with here, right? We have a variety of stakeholders. We have the board member, we have our principal, we have the student. Which one is more important? Can you do them all, etc.? So we haven't made a decision yet, though, have we?
I think it was E.
E. That's good. Okay. What would that choice be? So before we come back to actually having to choose one of these, what would that choice E be?
I actually think that D was was it C that got the, it was
A or
between
C?
C and D.
I think, so when I relook at A and think about it on a personal level,
Yeah.
that I didn't like the I'll
Yeah.
support any direction you go,
Right.
because I was thinking professional, but if it's a personal level, then I would go with it.
Okay, so let's do a revote. A. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6,
It's the best.
7.
It's the best ever.
B. C.
1.5.
1.5. D. Looks like A is the winner.
Right.
Chicken dinner. A.
Okay, so for what, did one of the people who didn't vote for A want to say why not?
Ben, you were kind of hesitant. You were.
I know, like, I've heard a couple of times, like, I think letting it go from the beginning should have been the option. Obviously, that's too late now, so maybe just trying to just squash it.
Yes. Some of the conversation, Ken, was this: it wasn't viewed as a school issue. Period. Not a school issue.
And there's already police involvement in tracing a plate. So if the police have already become involved, you would imagine that they're having conversations
They can
with
call
the
a parent.
principal as a private citizen,
Well, and that's,
not in her role as the building principal, as to whether or not she would wanna prosecute and move forward, which is sort of why I finally settled on A, because then it's a personal choice, not a professional choice, and I'll support you in how you wanna handle it. But I don't know, I think there's stuff missing that's in the context, but it's not embedded in the choices that we have.
So I think if we have to fill in one of the dots to move forward, I guess that dot would be A.
Okay, keep this in mind. One of the things that, as part of the, we're going to live the life, so to speak, as we progress through these choices. There is feedback at the end. I don't know that we're going to get there in the time that we have. But there is, because reflection is really important, and being able to surface the issues that what we want to know, what we would, how we might approach this, how we're thinking about this, whether or not we think that the fact that it was after prom, is there a linkage to the school via the fact that it was a student right after prom, so it was maybe tied to the school event. It is also the principal, and well, we'll see who else has something to say about this. But being able to surface the elements of context, right? Situational awareness is a key skill set to have as a leader, right? What are the things that are going on that you are paying attention to, or that are there, or that are missing? These are the kinds of things that we want to have reflected. And clearly this would be, we're a little bit sans context in terms of direct tie-in to, direct linkage with curriculum, right? So these are designed to be blended either with a team meeting, so there's some kind of strategic element to it, or directly to the curriculum. So those kinds of things, maybe we'd be able to tie them in even more directly, but just some things to bear in mind. But to keep these thoughts, because if you're seeing something that's missing, that's great, because we want to be able to get that articulated. And for the meantime, let's go with A.
Please
Yeah,
justify
hold on just a second.
what makes this the best course of action. Please.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
When the woman was speaking, I was just having a really hard time hearing her on the original. So
Yeah.
is it the high school principal's wife was the one who called the police originally?
Husband, yeah, spouse.
It's the spouse, the husband.
Husband or wife or whatever.
Yes,
of
the spouse.
Principal.
The spouse is the one that called the police.
Called the police. And is this the principal that would be calling? Yeah, I wouldn't have the principal involved with any of this. I misunderstood that. That's like a conflict of interest and a conflict everywhere.
And there was no damage?
If it's the spouse who actually originally called the police of the principal, then you wouldn't want the principals to be calling the parent, because that's their house, that the balloon was whatever, whether it was intentional or not intentional. I missed that piece of it. It was just really, really hard to hear her.
Okay. You got that, Ken?
I got it. I'm sorry. Obviously logistics get in the way, but I will say this. First of all, there is the, if we were in a different circumstance, right, we could just start over and do it again. There's nothing wrong with you can do a do-over for the whole thing if you wanted to do that. But at the same time, right, the goal here is not to get it right. Right? That's not our objective. The objective is to have an experience. And I'm imagining that you have had a number of times in your work experiences, certainly, where you end up in a situation that maybe you did not cause, but yet you're the one who's having to pick up the pieces. And there's potential value in that as well. So in terms of, I'm sorry that from a logistics perspective that the audio is not great in this context, but hopefully we can proceed. Now we're aware of some of those other things, and glad that it came to light at least that you didn't know that, but now maybe you do. And so this can influence. So maybe now we're in a little bit behind the 8 ball, and now we've got to maybe dig our way out a little bit. Is that okay?
Yes.
Principal Jackson responds, "Thanks for the direction. Let me speak with the student and my husband. Truth is, my husband feels really violated by this whole thing, so I'm not sure what he's going to want to do. Thank you for your support and letting me work it through. I'll get back to you as soon as possible." What do you do next?
Okay, so do we wait to hear back from the principal, or do we make a call to the board chair? I know one of you suggested that before. What do you think? We don't have to, I mean, you can call out, what you think.
Wait to hear back from the principal? How many? Wait to hear back from the principal? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, a bunch. More than half.
More than half.
Make a
Okay.
call to the board chair. A couple of people are getting their exercise and doing some hand raising.
Anybody want to share what you're thinking?
Any principal waiters want to talk about why you'd wait to hear from the principal?
I guess I said that because I feel like it's too late now to insert yourself in the middle of a process that's happening. Like I would have called earlier.
I mean, the issue is this, right? It's the principal's spouse's issue with a student. The only thing that can come back to you is the board chair saying, "Why didn't you tell me?" Well, because it's not my issue. It's not a school issue.
Is it the school board chair's kid, or is it any?
Yeah.
Yes.
So
No, it's a school, it's just a board member, not the chair.
another board member. So the chair.
Chair shouldn't.
Personally, the chair, you tell anything that could go back to the school board, you just give a casual heads up.
Yeah, but it's another board member's kid. That's a FERPA issue. It's not the board chair's kid, right?
Well,
That's what we just
it's
said?
yeah, I don't know.
Did you hear that interjection, Ken?
I did.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's
Good.
it is gonna come out.
Yeah, of course.
So I just, in the saying of that, do you believe that the other stakeholders feel that way? Right, so we're looking at it through the lens of the superintendent, obviously. But what is your sense of how the board chair would think about some kind of event like this happening where this is going on? And that they're going to find out about it, right?
The discussion is, so the option, I myself originally was assuming that the call would be to tell the board chair the specifics of the situation, including the identity of the student, and that it would, the principal, but it doesn't necessarily imply that. So it could just be a phone call to give a heads up that I originally told you there was no incident. Come to find out a few hours later, the next morning, I became aware of this incident that happened. We're looking into it. We'll let you know, once we have further information. I would be comfortable with that, but not with sharing the specifics for the reason Chris said about the FERPA violation. So
And that's perfectly valid, because we don't make that clear here whether or not it's just, I mean, I think that there is going to be, the next choice would be, if you did choose to call the board chair, what would you tell them? But the question is stylistically, right? Do you wait for more information, or do you make the call? So that's more of an approach perspective, irrespective of what, you can say, yes, I mean, you can qualify that if you do feel that it would be appropriate to call the board chair before having more information, then you can qualify that by saying, I would call them, but just to kind of give them a quick, like you just said, versus going into the detailed report yet, because you don't have all the details anyway. But the question more is, waiting or not waiting, really. And then we can get into the specifics of, if you chose not to wait, then what would be involved in that conversation. So did we say that it was wait to hear back? Was that the more heavily weighted choice?
A, correct? Wait, yep. Yes.
Now, one of the things that we have, especially when we're doing it with the group, is that, again, we won't get to the end, but maybe we can make this somehow available subsequently, so you can take as a trial to finish playing this sim, because I don't think we're going to get to the end unless we make some. I think there are some terminal endings that we can get to the end faster by making a number of bad choices. But the opportunity to say the I told you so's when you read the feedback at the end is always something that you can reserve the right to do. So.
Several days following the report of the prom incident by Principal Jackson, you receive a call from Felice Martin. She explains that she received a call from Principal Jackson, who told her that based on an incident that occurred following the prom, her son is being suspended and will not be allowed to attend graduation. She is not happy.
But that doesn't make sense.
Why would he get suspended?
Right. It's not a school issue.
It's not a school issue. And the principal that.
Well, we had decided, right, to let the principal handle it, right?
All right. So now we gotta unsuspend the kid.
Okay.
You call Principal Jackson and tell her of your call from Felice. She listens and then says, I thought we agreed that I was handling this locally.
So, the implications here, right? This, it's very easy to see, right? The implications, if we were tying this directly to the trust factor, right? How this would be, how the issues of trust are met when you're having to deal with multiple stakeholders can
You
show
hang
up.
the phone and decide what your next step will be. Which will you do next?
Okay, so now we're stuck between these two forces. So call Felice Martin, the parent, call the school board member and parent of Joey Martin, talk with her, call the chief of police, because the report was made, to see what's happening there, or wait for more information from the principal. Take a minute, think about what you would want to do. And then turn to the person next to you and talk with them.
Again, the choices are call Felice Martin, the school board member and parent of Joey Martin. That's A. B, call the chief of police because it was reported to the police. C, wait for more information from the principal.
Wait, what is that thing? Hang up the phone and decide.
Got it?
What can you tell me?
But if you don't know,
Yeah. Yeah.
Wait for principal.
No, I don't know. I can't wait. Pick up the phone and call, walk over the line, right?
Reported as a crime.
Well,
Because is it a hate crime as well?
Right,
You know what I mean? Like, or some chiefs and police would be like, yeah, all right, let's just talk through this as adults.
Depends on the relationship you have with the police.
right,
yeah.
And knowing how to, well, I guess
And
part of
knowing
that is like, how is the police gonna handle
Right.
that situation?
and so, students feel like, so then, news they would not just say, yeah, follow the process, or not live in the relation, and I would go first.
That means there's a principal living in the
Yeah.
same town.
Yeah, because they calling the police,
Another
like,
layer to this.
they might
Right, if
actually
the board member
You
needs
don't
to
have an
know.
opportunity to engage in
Right.
the
Well, they've already been in
Well, and you
contact.
can't really like hurt yourself. Like,
Well, and that's, and like,
But like, I can see, right, I can sit.
well, maybe not, because then it's kids in cars.
How does it, tell me what's coming on your side, so I can help fix it.
Okay, we'll take another minute.
Right.
Yeah, there's a lot of debate.
I don't think my option's on there.
Okay. So let me know.
My, I don't like
Jerry, what's the first one say again?
The first one is call Felice Martin, the school board member and the parent of Joey Martin.
I have to get to the bottom.
yeah. I like option D.
What
D option.
All right, we can take a vote, I think. A, call Felice Martin, the board member and parent of Joey Martin. How many would do A? That would be, no, well, how about B? Call the police?
Yeah.
Well, we have a taker. Oh, no, a flapper. No, was it a taker or a flapper?
There's so many like it depends.
Right, yeah.
I'm gonna assume you have a good relationship with the chief of police, and I would say then I would call the chief.
How
But when
about
you say that, is that because you kind of call them on the, informally, so to speak, off the record?
Yeah, we got a lot of
Trying
head
to-
nodding.
Trying
Yeah.
to get the information to figure out what to take as a next step, instead of just hearing from one side.
And wait for more information from the principal. Any takers on that one? Ironically,
Go back up. I'm gonna say A, I'm gonna go for it, let's see what, I'm gonna,
A?
I'll be the one that votes for A. Cause I'm worried about, being honest at this point, cause it's gonna come out and it's gonna look like you're hiding stuff. Like, there's no good choice, I feel like, so I don't know. I'm curious to see if we do pick A, what happens, so that's why I'm choosing A.
There's a number,
For the sake of seeing what happens.
there's a good amount of sentiment, Ken, that there's no good choice among these choices.
Okay.
But they'll go with A.
I'm gonna-
They're anxious to see what A will bring.
Yeah, let's see what happens.
Okay, is that the consensus?
Yes.
Sure.
Okay, let's see what happens.
You share the Jackson's perspective in hopes that it will broaden Felice's own perspective. When you are finished, she says, well, it appears that lines have already been drawn and decisions made. It is clear she perceived your input as biased toward a decision that has already been made.
Now, how did you think that would go? Or how did you hope that would go? And is that aligned with what you would have liked to have seen?
Everybody clear on that? It's the call to Felice that went wrong.
What did they say? It's hard for us to hear the audio through that.
Yeah, the audio is tough. You
So
shared the-
okay,
It appears
you want to read it, Jerry? I'll read the next one.
I'll read it. You share the Jackson's perspective in hopes that it will broaden Felice's own perspective. When you are finished, she says, well, it appears that the lines have already been drawn and decisions made. It's clear she perceived your input as biased toward a decision that has already been made.
Now, who is she?
She is the board person,
She's the board member.
The parent.
the parent of the kid who had the paint and got suspended.
Yeah.
We get to take the blame. We're on the top of the triangle.
Just so you know, Ken, to put that in perspective, this morning, in the whole period of discussing trust, there was a pyramid, and the peak of the pyramid was trust, and right below it was essentially that the leader takes the arrows for the missteps of those that the leader is responsible for leading. And that's like the epitome of the trust piece. So this has been brought forward by someone that made the connection to this morning. Here's a perfect example of when you give the mess to somebody else, you give the message to somebody else, you live with their mess, kind of thing, and you take the arrows as the leader.
Yeah, I always enjoyed the analogy, right? The monkey's on your back, right? That as a leader, your team, they like to come in. They have monkeys on their back. They come in, and they like to dump their monkeys onto you. And the goal is to actually, when they come into you with their monkeys on their back, that they walk out with some of yours. But one of the other things that, to that point is why we put credibility here, right? A manifestation of whether or not the perception of trust is going to be in your credibility. And we haven't been able to move that dial at all. We're still, we've been some ups and downs, so we're still in the same place.
Elise concludes by saying, I understand. I will definitely be calling Principal Jackson to appeal the 10-day suspension. How will you conclude the call?
Okay, so she's expressing some understanding, but she's obviously going to fight this. And so now what are we going to say to that? How are we going to kind of close this conversation? Don't ever forget that you're a parent first. Don't compromise your rights as a parent because you're a board member. Or B, I will encourage Principal Jackson to prioritize your meeting. I'll also remind her that you're a member of the Board of Education. Or C, I certainly recognize that you're a parent. However, don't forget that you are also a board member and you need to carry yourself as such. Or D, good luck, please keep me informed. I'm sure we'll be in touch in the near future.
Damn near future. Yeah.
So who called back?
So the callback was the mom of the kid who got suspended, and yeah.
This is the end of that conversation from the last screen.
Now, if it was a balloon full of heroin, I would understand.
All right, what are the choices?
So again, A, don't ever forget that you're a parent first, and don't compromise your rights as a parent because you're a board member. B, I will encourage Principal Jackson to prioritize your meeting. I'll also remind her that you're a member of the Board of Education. C, I certainly recognize that you're a parent. However, don't forget that you're also a board member and you need to carry yourself as such. D, good luck. Please keep me informed. I'm sorry, I shouldn't do intonation. Good luck. Please keep me informed. I'm sure we will be in touch in the near future. There's general shock and horror in this place, Ken.
You've already dug yourself into a hole. You can either keep digging or cut bait.
I was just gonna say, can we do like a mix and match like menu option?
Well, again, that would be something that is part of, the goal is to be thinking about what you would do, right? Now we don't want, especially in this kind of situation, right? This is not an easy situation, no matter how you slice it, right? You can, yes, if it was a balloon of heroin, that would be, I'm sure that would add elements of complexity to this that go beyond. But, there are some stylistic issues here that you may mix and match, but it's kind of what would you lead with, right? Because we can't do things instantaneously. What would you lead with? Even if you were saying, well, I kind of like A, I kind of like B, I kind of combine them. But again, if you had to choose what you would start with, what would that be? But again, to have the discussion of how you would do this, that's obviously what we want, because that ultimately would be what you might remember, right? Walking away from this when faced with this kind of not this particular circumstance, but when you're dealing with an angry stakeholder, right? This could be a parent. This could be, it is a parent. It doesn't have to be something that's specifically at a board level, because you have plenty of stakeholders that have interests beyond the issue itself, right? Because they're not necessarily they're advocating for a particular aspect of it. And so having a rational conversation may not be something that's so easy to do.
So we'll do a quick poll. A, don't ever forget you're a parent first. B, I will encourage Principal Jackson to prioritize your meeting and remind her that you're a board member. Not seeing a lot of action there.
Probably the best option.
C, I certainly recognize you're a parent. However, don't forget you're also a board member and you need to carry yourself as such. C, good luck. Please keep me informed. We have decision. A, B,
What the heck?
3, 4, 5, 6, 7. C, half. D,
Let's see what happens.
1.2.
I know, I kind of want to see what happens.
What? What did we say? What was it? B? Was it A? B?
It sounded like B had the most.
Let's go with B.
All right, so I'll encourage Principal Jackson to prioritize your meeting. This is Sandy Walters, message from the board chair. Hey, I'm receiving all kinds of concerned and angry calls about the way you're handling the Martin issue. I would advise you to figure out how to bring this issue to a quick resolution. I want to be updated regularly.
You hang up from your call with Felice and decide what your next step will be. Who will you call?
Okay, so after our call with the parent, with the board member, who are we going to call next? What's our next course of action? Is it going to be called to call Principal Jackson? Just call the school board chair? To call the chief of police? Or district legal counsel?
Board chair.
Yeah.
That's just low.
I know. Call Carl and say, hey.
Who's
Carl, what
out
should I do
there?
now? Call the
They want a fifth choice. Call the NHSAA office. All right, so again, who do you call next? Principal Jackson is A, school board chair B, chief of police C, and legal counsel D.
The principal,
How many say the principal?
because you said you would, right? Like you just told them, Mom, you
Yeah.
could call.
Did you get that rationale, Ken?
I got it.
Okay.
Everybody agree?
No problem.
Everybody good with that?
Okay.
All right.
I would call the board chair to let her know that I had had a conversation with the board member and had said that I would call the principal. So just a quick update and then call the principal. But I'll go with A. That's good.
Okay, I mean, does anybody, now, the thing, the reason why we have you commit, at least, as a facilitator, this is a method, you don't have to do it this way, but the reason we ask you to commit before having the conversation is to allow for the possibility that you may hear something that you find compelling and you change. It's okay, right? If you hear a different perspective, a different approach that you maybe hadn't thought of, maybe you dismissed it, but maybe you hadn't thought of it, and that causes you to rethink your choice and to actually change your direct, that's great. So if anybody else found that compelling, that description, again, the goal here is not to say that you won't call the principal, but that you're saying, I'm going to call the board chair first just to let her know, and then I'm going to call the principal because that's what I said I was going to do. That's okay. I mean, that's an approach, right? So if you feel compelled by that, by all means, you don't have to stick to your guns and go with A unless you choose to.
The message prior to this was from the board chair, correct? I call the board chair back and say, what are you hearing?
Yeah.
What's the information you're getting? And then move from there. So I was the board chair, thinking about it.
Okay.
I'm seeing some changes. Are we changing or are we sticking with it?
Any changes, or are we sticking with A?
I go to B.
You gotta be.
B.
People say go to B.
Chief of police.
Okay, what a flexible group. Wow, good for you.
They're just curious to see how this all
Call
turns
and
out.
call. Thanks for calling me back. What's the update? What update do you give?
Okay, so do we, so now we have that choice about how much are we going to say? So we can say, I support Ms. Jackson's decisions. Joey will be suspended through graduation. He won't be allowed to participate in commencement, and arrangements will be made for him to pick up his diploma the next day. It also sounds like Mr. Miller will pursue criminal charges. Or Mrs. Jackson has reached her decision. I have yet to hear from Felice, but based on Dr. Jackson's decision, I expect there will be an appeal to my office. Or C, I need your guidance. I think I may have misstepped on this one. I offer Dr. Jackson my unconditional support, but I am in a bad space with her decisions. What do you suggest? D, I'm calling to let you know the student will be suspended, will not graduate, and the issue is black and white. There are really no other options.
The last
So
one.
Frankl said it,
That's
make
right.
your mistake.
Our earlier conversation.
Or our earlier conversation on this matter never happened. As you know, confidentiality laws prohibit any discussion of specific student outcomes at this point, and this is not a board matter. I will let you know if it becomes a board matter.
Yes.
I think we're getting a sense that one should have shown up way earlier.
Yeah. What do you think? So think about what you want to do, and then let's do a quick conversation because I think we're running out of time.
While they're thinking,
Sounded like.
while they're thinking, I just have a quick question, Ken.
Yes.
If someone is facilitating, if one of these folks were to be facilitating any one of the Sims with a group of people, is there a written guide or a facilitator's guide or something that goes along with accompanying their facilitating?
Yes. So I mean, generally, when whoever we work with, right, we would do a training session, onboarding, all things sim. So both the logistics of, the mechanics of the software, but also, the approaches to facilitation and usage, because again, you can assign it or you can facilitate it. So depending on how you're using it. And then we provide a facilitator guide, so you have something with you in your hands that gives the guidance as well.
All right, great, thank you. So now that we did the four corners stall for a minute for people to ponder, let's run through the selections. A, I support Mrs. Jackson's decision. Joy will be suspended through graduation. B, Mrs. Jackson has reached her decision. C, I need your guidance. I think I may have misstepped on this one. D, I'm calling to let you know the student will be suspended, will not graduate, and the issue is black and white. Or E, our earlier conversation on this matter never happened.
I say second part of E is correct. Yeah. Just
See?
say the second part of E, to me, I find we should have done like you were saying a long time ago, but I think that's probably the best for me.
Do we have E's?
Do it.
Go ahead.
Yeah, do it.
There's a challenge to do E.
Okay.
So E's saying.
Sandy Walters responds, trying to put the genie back in the bottle at this point seems a bit naive. Knowing confidentiality laws is good, but putting them into practice seems better. Okay, I mean, do we want to wrap up, Jerry? I don't want to take this.
Yeah, I think to bring it to a kind of a conclusion that makes
I'm
sense.
just going to real
The
quickly.
board chair says she understands. Hands up. You wait to hear back. You
Click
explain
through.
the next. You have just finished hearing Felice's appeal. After reviewing the facts of the case, Sandy Walters reports, I wanted to let
So just
Sandy
to see where
respond.
this goes.
I'm just sharing the information with you. You hang up from the board chair and finish your day.
And now the father gets
Mr. Martin
involved,
begins.
and
I
depending
can't
on which path you may
Mr.
have,
Martin,
we may
look
have
deeply into your eyes.
had involvement from the principal's spouse as
You
well.
call the chief of In executive session at the board meeting of the Board of Education, the board chair shares your frustration and reminds the board of the appropriate communication protocols. The information shared by the board chair is personalized and internalized by Felice Martin. Though the consequences remain in effect and Joey did not participate in graduation, the fallout from this incident did not end there. At subsequent meetings of the Board of Education, Felice Martin has become a vocal opponent of most of the positions that you take on school issues. You continue to try and navigate the relationships, but you have definitely seen a diminished level of support by the board. One of the most challenging and important tasks.
so you see now we provide some of that, the summative feedback.
Simulation
And again, you'd have an opportunity to really
relations and discipline.
reflect on this, but just I wanted to give you a sense of what the sim provides in terms of summative feedback. And again, this is not to tell you good or bad in terms of you. This is designed to tell you the decisions, the choices that were made were a reflection of a series of trade-offs. And so this is some insight into what some of those trade-offs might be. So you engaging in regular two-way communication as a top bar, create, sustain positive collaborative relationships, provide moral direction, promote professional norms, act ethically and professionally. So every decision, every choice option was incrementing or decrementing these variables, and then we tell you about that here. So here you'll get insight into, remind you what the choices were. So ultimately there were 12 decision points. We remind you of the scenario, what the learning objectives in the scene were, your choice, and what the other choices were. And then the specific feedback on your choice and which variables were affected. So there is that opportunity to go back and look at the choice options and also the choices that were made to get some insight into what was going on in this context, right? What were we getting at? What was the implications here contextually? And again, an opportunity for your further reflection or agreement or disagreement in terms of the way things play out. So as you're facilitating, if you're doing this in small groups, the groups can have an opportunity to play it, then review the feedback, and then come back for a debrief. Or you can share this report with everybody upon completion of the exercise. Or if it's asynchronous, they would have an opportunity to reflect and maybe do an assignment after the fact, just to kind of extrapolate from the sim to some other topic, right? What would be the implications of equity in this instance, or ethics, or something that may not have been specifically part of called out specifically in the scenario, but if we ask that question, right, I'm sure that we can get some pretty robust thought about what that is, because now we have that context, right? We have a sense of these characters that we can make some assumptions about or not, and be able to extrapolate from that in terms of enhancing our understanding of how things play out in life, as opposed to what the right answer might be, because often it's not that easy. And so this is the nature of the kinds of work that you can do. And again, to go back to the list of sims that are available, this is the library. As actually, there's, when we're adding a few, and we're constantly adding. And as you can imagine, these are done, again, they're manifestations of somebody's experience, or it's inspired by. This one was actually with a superintendent from Connecticut, I believe, back when. And that's what that is. Any questions I can answer before turning you back to the regularly scheduled program?
Any questions for Ken?
Yeah, can I just, and I apologize, I had to step out, so maybe I missed this.
Yeah, Mark.
Roughly how long does it take, a group of people to sort of go through a module?
So this one, the board relations is a particularly long one. Most of them are in that 6 to 10 decision point range, and they're designed to really be played in about an hour plus or minus 15 minutes. Okay. When you're doing them in groups. So they can fit within, typically you can design them in an hour. Although, as you kind of saw there, the goal is to, if you're using this, you're structuring something around this where you're embedding it, right? Really the objective is to have an experience and to provoke the conversation. If you find that the conversation it's not as important to finish the sim per se, if there's a robust conversation that's provoked, right? Because maybe there's something going on in the district, or maybe something's going on in a particular building that's really compelling, and you want to kind of get at it without, getting at it, right? And maybe it's a very heated, like we wouldn't necessarily simulate mask mandates, right? Because it's too hot. But on the other hand, dealing with angry stakeholders, that could be something that's valuable. So we may, deal with an angry stakeholder, and then, have that conversation and see how that can be kind of backdoor into things that we can do to maybe get the temperature down, or respond to without reacting, so to speak. So, you don't necessarily need to finish the sim, but again, they are designed with that hour kind of in mind.
Thank you. Any other questions? Looks like that's a wrap, Ken.
So, actually, I don't have a slide. Jerry can share with you our contact information. And
we have it on our website. It's people can link to it right from our website.
And we'd love to hear from you and to talk further about how this might fit within the work that you're doing in your districts and schools, and to explore with you how we can work together.
Great.
I wish you all the best in your continued, I guess one cohort is finishing, right? So congrats. And the other cohort, all the best on your journey. And closing out the school year positively.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ken.
Thank you.
Thank you.